Well, it got much worse last year, last year or 2 years ago, when PADI made it that you could become a Sidemount diver and log 50 dives and self-certify as a Sidemount instructor. I'm like, oh my, like this is nonsense. Like, it's crazy. But anyway, with that knowledge, so basically, if anyone came to me and said they wanted to be a Sidemount instructor, I'd be like, okay, how often do you dive Sidemount? Like, is it something you do, as a sideline? Is it something you do only when you go fun diving? Or is it something you actually incorporate in your teaching? Like, so I've got a couple of guys who are Sidemount divers, and I gave them before I left to Thailand for a month. I'm like, look, when I get back, guys, if you want to continue your journey to becoming Sidemount instructors, I want you to be logging Sidemount dives and teaching on Sidemount. You need to be comfortable teaching normal courses, like open water courses, maybe not in confined water, but during the open water dives, switch to Sidemount. When you're doing advanced courses, teach it in Sidemount. Make it as part of your normal dive configuration.
You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things Sidemount and cave diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and cave diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top Sidemount and cave divers. Whether you're new to Sidemount, been Sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things Sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Hey, welcome back to Speaking Sidemount. I'm Steve Davis. This episode is brought to you by our show sponsor XDEEP and by the patrons of Speaking Sidemount. Huge thanks to both for their support that makes everything you're about to watch and listen to possible. In this podcast, I've been able, using Sidemount as the foundation, to interview and learn from those who are pushing the boundaries of diving, and in particular, cave exploration. It's amazing to me, and I hope to all of you, to listen, watch, and admire the skills, guts, and determination of those at the cutting edge of diving. But as I opened, this podcast has Sidemount diving as its foundation. So it's great to go back to our roots and look at why Sidemount is such a great way to dive, to look at what it takes to be good in Sidemount, and importantly, what it takes to become and develop into an effective Sidemount instructor. Now, for those of you not aspiring to instructing, this is also a template for what you should be looking for from an instructor to support your own development in Sidemount diving. So in this vein, when Anand Chandra Sekaran reached out to me, I was pleased to be able to get him on the show to share his perspectives on teaching diving, both at the open water and instructor levels, and also how one might successfully progress into Sidemount diving or to Sidemount instructor levels. Anand is a PADI Course Director based in the Perhentian Islands in Malaysia, and through his dive center, Anti-Gravity Divers, he and his team teach recreational courses to instructor levels and also Sidemount diving. Anand has built his own diving to cave levels and brings much of what he's learned in cave and technical training to his recreational and instructor courses. Now, in this episode, Anand and I get into how he got started in diving, his transition into instructing and dive center management, his path to Sidemount diving, and the challenge of starting cave diving, his experiences in dive center management, and his passion for instructing. And then we get into what it takes to get started in Sidemount, the best preparation for Sidemount courses, finding an instructor, the foundations of what makes a good Sidemount diver, the importance of nailing your entries and exits, Sidemount skill development, and of course the massive influence that correct weighting plays in becoming stable in the water. Now, while we're talking about Sidemount skill development, I want to remind you again of the Sidemount Fundamentals ebook that's available on the Sidemount Pros website at www.sidemountpros.com/store. This book is the manual for my Sidemount Fundamentals course, and it covers everything from why you would want to dive Sidemount, Sidemount equipment selection and fitting it to your body, getting in and out of the water, and all of the Sidemount skills that we teach on the Sidemount Fundamentals course. It's inexpensive, and I'm sure that it will help your Sidemount diving. So look out for that again on the Sidemount Pros website. So let's get on with this episode of Speaking Sidemount. Hey Anand, welcome to Speaking Sidemount.
Hi Steve, thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. It's great to meet you virtually like this. I've known of you for a while, based in Malaysia, and seen some of your exploits online. Also seen that you've been speaking at a few conferences. So great to meet you. Great to have you on the show. To get us started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I come from a very small town up north in Malaysia called Kota Baru. It's way up north. It's like on the border to Thailand, and very, very small town. We live, so it's close to the ocean. It's about 20 minutes from the ocean. Generally, so my family, we've been doing holidays and, and we go on the weekends to the ocean. We used to go to the ocean quite a lot on the weekends. I learned to swim at a very young age, which is not very common for most Malaysian people, actually. I started learning to swim at 3 when I was 3. My parents made it a point to have me take swimming lessons as well.
Yeah,
we
awesome.
were going to the ocean, to the sea quite a lot. And now I live in, I consider Kota Baru my hometown. That's where my mom still lives. That's where our family base is. But I'm kind of a nomad, and I switch around between the Perhentian Islands, which is not far away, Kuala Lumpur, and also in Thailand. And I mainly right now I'm a PADI Course Director. That's my main job, and I teach IDCs.
Whereabouts is the dive center that you're teaching IDC?
So my main dive center, which is also the one I co-own, is on the Perhentian Islands on the mainland part of Malaysia. So a territory of Borneo belongs to Malaysia. So I'm on the mainland side, which is just south of Thailand, and we're located just like on the south side of the border and on the east side of Thailand. So East Malaysia, East Coast facing the Gulf of Thailand, South China Sea.
Yeah, very nice. And the local diving there, I assume, is very good?
Local diving here is fairly decent, I would say. I mean, I've obviously dived in much better places, but it's a really great place to train new divers, a good training ground. And we have fairly advanced divers coming out here as well. We have a few artificially sunken wrecks, though only a couple are, only a few of them are suitable for penetration training. And most of the other ones are just like, sunk.
Yeah, it's a really important facet when you're looking at dive centers. It's one thing to have awesome diving around you, and obviously that's important, but it's almost equally important, and in some cases more important, to have sites that are suitable for training.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know it's one of the things that was amazing about Gozo and being there when I was teaching there was just how easy it was and how many great sites we had for training at pretty much any depth we wanted.
We have great areas for confined water training. So we do confined open water here, which is the norm. Yeah, it's better than most swimming pools because visibility is amazing. And students get to see fish right from the get-go in confined water training.
Makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, you mentioned in your communication to me, obviously you're a Sidemount diver. That's why you're on Speaking Sidemount. But you mentioned a little bit about your journey into Sidemount diving. Tell me a little bit about what prompted you to look at Sidemount diving and how you got yourself into it.
It's kind of a funny story because it's actually the reason why I got into diving as well. Because in the late 80s, so Malaysia were a former British colony. So we used to get a lot of so on terrestrial TV back in the day, when we didn't have satellite TV and Netflix and all that, it was just terrestrial TV, and a lot of the programs were British programs. And one of the programs I remembered watching when I was about 10 years old, or possibly even younger. I had to look it up, by the way. I had to look it up recently what the name of the documentary was, but it's The Underground Eiger. So these two British guys who are basically exploring this underground river system, and they were trying to connect, one at the entrance to the exit. And it was really fascinating because these guys were already diving in Sidemount configuration. Like they had these two tanks strapped on the sides, and so I remember. I haven't actually gone back and watched. I should go back and watch it again. But I looked up the name. It was The Underground Eiger. It was so that actually sparked my interest in. So I've always been fascinated by overhead environments as a child. Every time we went on holiday as a family, on the coast, I'd see a cave and I'd be like, I want to go in there. And I used to play in my bedroom under the bed, with my toys under the bed. You have a blanket over
Awesome.
two beds, and anything to crawl
Yep.
underneath. I was that always
Yeah.
fascinated me. And part of why I got into diving was I was fascinated by overhead environments, wreck diving, cave diving. However, that journey, it took me a while before I started that foray into cave diving. It was almost 10 years after I started, more than 10 years after I started diving, actually, before I actually eventually went there. But
yeah, sure.
I started, so I did my open water course here on the Perhentian Islands in 2005. And I remember during my course, I think it was after the third dive, and I was already, the bug already caught me. I wasn't natural. I wasn't a natural diver. So I'm a fairly big guy, way above average for the average Malaysian. So I've got big lungs. So the breathing part, breathing out, just the normal thing where you breathe on the top half of your lungs, and you're just trying to hold on to your breath underwater. So I was like a Michelin man underwater in my first few dives. And even though I was a natural, of course, then I realized very quickly, like, being a good swimmer doesn't necessarily translate to being a good diver, right? But regardless, like on my third dive, third training dive, I asked my instructor, so how did you get in? I asked him, like, how did you get into instructing? Or, like, how did your journey go? How long did it take you? And he basically said, you can do it for, you can become an instructor in 6 months if you want. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, is it, that can't be right. Like, it's not possible. Like, how can you go from where I am right now to being an instructor in 6 months? Yeah.
From zero to hero, as they say.
I have a very different perspective on that now, but we can talk about it later. But,
yes.
Back then I just I worked in my family business with my dad. My family owned a textiles trading business back home, and it was very near to the Perhentian Island, so it would only take me 2 hours travel time door to door, and every weekend, every chance I got, I'd come out diving. And then very quickly, a few months after my open water course, did my advanced course, and then a year later, rescue diver. And then the year after that, I did my dive master course over a period of 6 months, like just on the weekends and coming out to the island. And then finally, took my first step to being an instructor in 2008, and then decided I needed to have a very serious conversation with my dad, who was, he was very much a patriarch in the family, and being from an Asian background and you work in your family business, it's a very hard conversation to have. I don't know if you can relate to that.
Now, it's actually a bit different for, the Anglos of us. I think we have that a little different, but I'm very aware that Asian culture sees that quite differently, you know, whether it's Japan, India, or through Southeast Asia. I know family is very, very important, and following in the footsteps and doing the right thing is seen to be very important too, right? So I get it. I understand.
Yeah. So anyway, I had that difficult conversation, and then very much, I think, so I freelanced around as an instructor for about a year. Got some courses, like some decent number of courses under my belt, and then my best mate at the time, we went to school together. So his family owned a resort up in this island in Thailand called Koh Lanta, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing with your life now? I see you're diving a lot," and then I'm like, "Yeah, I'm kind of, I've just quit my family business, and and he's like, "Hey, why don't you come up to Koh Lanta and start up a dive center with me in Thailand?" We started up, a tiny little dive center, just the two of us, and it was I was the only instructor for the first 6 months, and yeah, so basically it was we were based in a resort that had a pool in it, and that was actually great that we had a pool there. We could do a couple of try dives in the pool, and so my best mate, he was the salesperson, so he'd talk to he was a really charming guy, and he'd get he'd just strike up conversations with people, and he'd sign up the people for for me to take out the next day. And yeah, that was how it went for the first 6 months.
Brilliant.
Just owning my craft as a dive center manager, owner, my first foray into it. I had no idea what I was doing. And it was a really great learning curve, because after a couple of months, we got busy enough that I had to take on a couple of other freelance instructors on a daily basis. And so he decided to leave me the next year. And
oh no!
And he was moving on to start up another business, and I was like, okay, do I keep this going, or do I, or what do I do? And then finally, I had another guy interested in partnering up, and then so I partnered up with another Thai instructor, and we basically built anti-gravity divers, which is the name of my dive center in Koh Lanta. And we just took it slow. It was a very slow approach, minimal investment at the start, and then finally in our third year we invested into buying a big day boat that was basically the normal way to run an operation in Koh Lanta. And all that continued right up until 2015. I ended up coming back home and starting up another dive center, like a branch on the Perhentian Islands where I first started diving. And then so between 2015 and 2020, I had 2 operations running. And before I knew it, I was deep into dive center management, and I wasn't very happy at that point in my life. And then when COVID hit, I had to shut down the operation in Koh Lanta. And I almost quit diving because, and then I finally realized that, hey, why am I so unhappy? And I finally realized it was because, hey, actually your real passion is teaching diving. It's not, management, right? And then, so my business partner in Malaysia, who was also my course director when I became an instructor, so he was teaching the IDCs right up until COVID, and then decided, after COVID, that he wasn't going to do it anymore. But I'd been staffing with him for over many IDCs. Like I've done like maybe 15 with him, over the years. And it was also my way of keeping fresh and keeping up to date.
Yes.
And it was because as a manager, I wasn't necessarily teaching the basic level courses that much over those number of years. But I was staffing IDCs, so I still kept up with a lot of the teaching aspects of it in that way. So we switched roles, basically. Long story short, we switched roles in just after COVID, and he didn't want to teach anymore, and I want to go back into teaching a lot more. So I became a course director, and now we're very much comfortable into our new roles, and I definitely love what I'm doing for sure. And
brilliant.
Yeah, so so that's what I've been doing full time, almost since 2023.
Brilliant.
Course director.
Brilliant. Yeah, great to find your calling as well, right? So sometimes you can get trapped in businesses and you end up doing the wrong thing. And one of the great things when you're an owner too is if you figure it out, is you can change roles and you can do the bits that you want to do if you're prepared to hire someone and nurture them into the other roles. So perfect. Tell me a bit about we mentioned we've been through your career in terms of how you got started in diving and becoming an instructor and a course director, but how did Sidemount come into this, and how did you first see it, and what grabbed you about it?
Yeah, so very much like you, because I've listened to your podcast, previous podcast, but it was because of the video by Steve Bogarts, right? It was the one that came out in 2010 or whatever it was, and I watched that video and I went, my God, like almost everyone else, I was like, I want to do that. Like I want to be diving like that. You know? And it was, and then that was the time, because I'm a PADI Course Director, and most agencies, I think at the time, was kind of jumping on the bandwagon with the Sidemount revolution, and so I then decided to so I was trying to find someone that could do it. In retrospect, I wish I had gone with my first choice. But anyway. So it was Ben Raymond you've had on the podcast before. so he had a dive center called Blue Label. So he was doing this whole talk, partnering up with PADI doing talks. And so they came to Koh Lanta and they did like side mount sessions. And I think they had a CCR there as well. I can't remember now. But so so I had a conversation with him and so I can't remember exactly why I didn't sign up with him. It wasn't to do with the money. I think it was just a scheduling issue. Like he was quite a busy man at the time as well. And so I ended up doing my side mount. So I did my tech courses. So in retrospect, it was definitely not a good idea, and I don't recommend anyone to do it. In retrospect, I did all my I did my side mount training, side mount instructor training, my tech 40 to 50 training, and instructor ratings, all in that space of 2 weeks. I definitely don't recommend anyone to take that route. And I will, I'm saying it now, but I'm going to say it publicly that don't do that. So becoming a tech instructor back then, coming back and then you're not, obviously I ended up, I was quite honest with myself. I'm like, hey, look, you're not teaching tech diving for sure, not until you dive it a lot. And so I put that aside for a bit. And but I stayed with side mount diving. So I bought my first Razor harness. I think it was the Razor. No, at the time I can't remember. It's the one with the coin dump off, right?
Yeah.
So, but I bought it and I remember receiving it. I was, trying to set it up, and I got so frustrated setting this harness up, and I just put it aside, and I'm like, oh my god, like it's impossible. Like there's no one to teach me. There's no videos online to teach you how to do it. And I was like, okay, screw this. And then I bought the SMS 50, the Hollis SMS 50, which also in retrospect was wasn't the best rig, but it was obviously also the Florida style harness. And I was at that point I had no clue as to the differences between the loop bungee and the ring bungee style. And yeah, it was a lot of trial and error on my part. It was just playing around, and there was nothing really available online that you could. I was trying to learn as much as I can, from whatever videos that were available, and just playing around, tinkering around with stuff. And I remember teaching my first few side mount courses at the time where, I could not figure out how to correct the students' tank trim. I was like, okay, what am I doing wrong? Okay, and then after that, so after a couple of courses, I decided, okay, nah, you're not teaching this. It's not. You need to really learn more about what you're doing. And then I came across Steve Martin's videos.
Yes.
And they were great. They were brilliant. Like I liked how in depth he went, and I basically studied those videos in and out, and and then just started doing it for myself, okay, make sure you've got this down yourself before. So I actually, during those years between that and when I first started cave diving, so I was doing a lot of side mount dives in side mount 2015, 2016, and then I had to put it aside. I can't remember why, but I think it was dive center got busier and so I just, it's just one of those things, like you stop doing something, you don't keep up with it, you put it aside and you're like, okay, I'll get back to it tomorrow, and tomorrow becomes a month, and then 6 months, and then a year. And then, so finally, when I could find the time, so I'd always wanted to do, my cave course, right? And, so I booked with Blue Label with Ben Reynolds in 2013. I'd even put a deposit down and all that. And then, again, dive center management came in the way, scheduling conflicts, and I had to cancel that course. But then they were going to put me, so at that time, Por, who you've had on the podcast, Por Parasu, so he was going to be my instructor. And then, so we became Facebook friends, and between 2013 and 2017, I was seeing how active he was as an instructor, as an explorer. And when it came time when I actually had the time to do the course, I was like, okay, there's no doubt I want to do this guy because I'm seeing how active and his exploits to Indonesia, how he actually was one of the first guys to go to Sulawesi and Baobao to actually help explore and open up that area. So in 2017, so I managed to find the time to do my cave course, and then I realized, oh shit, you haven't been Sidemount diving for about 6 months. You gotta so like a couple of days before the cave course, I started doing as much diving as I could on Sidemount. It was only like 2 days. I mean, but yeah, of course, again, in retrospect, I don't recommend that to anyone. It's like learning it's like going into the mountains on a dirt bike when you hadn't, ridden a dirt bike for ages. And then, so it's kind of like that, maybe. But anyway, I kind of, I held my own in the course. Like anyone, will tell you, and it's a humbling experience, the cave course, but we took a few extra days. So it wasn't just me on the course. It was I had like 2 other guys who were also instructors and Sidemount divers, and I learned a lot on my cave course. I learned how humbling it is to of course when you're at that point I was a PADI master instructor, and and you think you're the shit, and then you enter the world of cave diving, and you're like, okay, you're like the Dunning-Kruger curve, the classic Dunning-Kruger, where you have your confidence level on the right, on the left, sorry, and then the curve just massively drops down at some point,
unconsciously incompetent. It's a super interesting thing because and I kind of intrinsically have a really good feel for where you were at, because I went straight, a little bit like you. I learned cave diving in a way that I would not recommend, in that I did my Sidemount course immediately before my intro to cave course. So it was not full cave, but intro to cave and cabin with it. And it's not the best way to do it by any means, because I think you and I would both agree that bedding in your Sidemount diving to a very high level is the prerequisite for a good cave course. However, one thing in my, I'd been diving, let me think what year, I'd probably been diving for 30 years when I did my cave course. And so I was incredibly comfortable in the water. And I think you probably were the same in that you, while you didn't maybe have the skill set dialed in the way that you really wanted to or needed to, but that comfort level is something, and it's important. And so, when you're doing things where, your mask's off and you've got issues and everything, that comfort really becomes your friend. And so while, I think as I said, you and I would agree that being really dialed in Sidemount before your cave course is the way to do it. There is something about, having, a few thousand dives under your belt or many years under your belt and then turning up. It does make a difference. It's not nothing, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you got to not be thinking about, how to route your hoses, where does this where does this go, where does that go? It's got to be like instinctive.
Yeah, perfect. Hey, let's stop there for a second, because I think one of the things I wanted to cover with you, given that you're an IDC and given that you're a specialist Sidemount diver and that you now teach Sidemount, what at this point here we're looking at what level of Sidemount diver should you be before you go to cave course. And so let's start to chat a little bit about some of the things that are important to become good at Sidemount. You just mentioned equipment and hose routing, which to me is the foundation of everything. The first thing is getting your equipment set up and getting it fitted correctly for your body. Let's talk through a little bit about, give me your perspective on what it takes to be good at Sidemount.
I think one of the first things is equipment awareness, equipment selection, knowing how to properly adjust your own harness. I think what's missing in most Sidemount courses is that the instructors adjust the harness for the students, but not necessarily giving them the knowledge as to what what they're doing, like how what adjustments are made, and all. So I think that's quite important because, especially with the height of where your waist webbing should be, and just an example, but just basically knowing how to set up your own rig, which I was never taught, and I was so I think that's quite important, and also like being able to just having okay, let's go into the skills aspect of it, but it's stability underwater is definitely, and obviously fitting techniques and stability as well. So stability and fitting techniques come hand in hand. I think also because to be stable, you need to be really proficient in the back kick, even though you're not really kicking to propel yourself. You're more, it's more about the angle of your fitting to remain stable in the water.
You're absolutely right. And I remember when I perfected my back kick, and I kind of made the statement, this has changed my life. And it really did. It certainly changed my diving, because all of a sudden you had a tool in your toolkit where, I was learning decompression diving and Sidemount at the time, along with a whole lot of other stuff. And, being in formation while you're doing decompression ascents, it's really important that you're not swimming in circles, and it's really important that you're not crashing into your teammates, right? And so having this back kick where, even if your teammate happens to be coming towards you, you can back kick away and put your arms out and maintain a formation, let alone cave diving, where it's a critical skill. So you're absolutely right about, I mean, I look at this too. I mean, I kind of, and it's the way, I'm not sure how you do your courses, maybe perhaps we can talk that through as well, but this thing about equipment setup and having it fitted correctly to your body, that's one thing. But what I do on my courses is I show everyone how to do it, but then they actually fit their own harnesses for themselves. So I might show them, demonstrate with one of the students' harnesses and go, this is how you adjust each of the straps, and this is where everything should be positioned, and so on. And then they do it with their own harness. So they set it up. And as we're talking through, you mentioned the height of the waist strap, for instance. How do you make sure that you've got that low enough on your hips so that you've got a good amount of length for your connection? How do you make sure that your chest D-rings are the right height, that your bungees are in the right position? So all of these things there, it's a little bit like giving them the fishing pole rather than the fish. You're teaching them how to set their own harness up, and hopefully they bought a harness before the course, but if they haven't and they're going to buy one after the course, then they at least have been through the process of setting it up. Honestly think the next thing, even before you kind of talk about the water stuff, is how the hell do you get in and out of the water? Because many Sidemount divers struggle with entries and exits in different environments. It's one thing to shore dive or a swimming pool or a cenote, sinkhole cave entrance, but it's quite a different thing to do it from a boat and to be able to do it floating in the water, or to be doing it standing in the water. And so this idea of having correctly fitted equipment, but then having your donning procedure really, really dialed in, and your doffing procedure really dialed in, so that it's easy for you to get in and out of the water, I think is critical. You mentioned then buoyancy control and stability, and you'll see this in Steve Martin's videos too. At the very beginning of those sections, they talk about weighting and correct weighting. And, this weighting then has an impact on your buoyancy control. So those two are the first two. Then working on how do you trim properly? What should you feel with your body? The correct posture, tech diving posture, with your shoulders back, chest forward, legs extended, bent at the knee to some degree, arms out in front, head up. All of those things. And then that all works together to give you that balance and what I call relaxed static stability, which means you can kind of relax but be stable in the water. And then, propulsion. And I get quite shocked sometimes on my courses, especially when I get experienced divers who come and they can't execute a helicopter turn properly, or they don't have a very good frog kick. Even though they've been sometimes tech diving for quite some time, and of course, if you don't have those two, you don't have a back kick really either. So, this thing of propulsion and getting a good frog kick, a good helicopter turn, and a good back kick, so important before you even think about all the other aspects of sidemount diving. Of course, all of those principles apply to backmount diving as well. So it's kind of the foundations of good technical diving, right? So
So when so usually during my courses, I try to give it to them in stages, right? So initially it would be a huge focus on how to get in and out of the water. So I try and I always start off the beach, right? So beach
Yes.
entries and how do we hit up, So we're lucky in the sense that we don't have huge waves crashing onto us here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I'd teach them a different way if we had that, but we have fairly calm waters. So, but it's about walking, how to walk in with your cylinders and just how to doff it and don it and which cylinders to clip on, first and how which hose to route first. So these are things that just donning and doffing and hose routing at the start. I do dry drills as well.
Yes.
A lot of dry drills before going in the water. But of course, depending on the level of your student that you have, how fast they grasp it can vary, right? So sometimes I'm training, it varies from just normal recreational divers to instructor level. So obviously the instructors will get it much faster. But I don't have a set number of days in my courses when I teach Sidemount. So I'm continuing a course and starting a new one straight after my IDC, where I've got 2 students who from my previous course who are coming back to continue because so they just need more practice with awareness, gear awareness. It's a lot to consider for someone for a recreational diver.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that. I have exactly the same thing, and I've gone away from a Sidemount course costs this amount of money. Now I do days of training, so there's a daily rate, and I sort of make the point. Look, normally this can be done in 4 or 5 days, but sometimes it will take longer. There is the odd occasion where it's shorter, and you made the point of instructors. It's actually, I find when I get a technical diver, right, if I've got someone who has a lot of experience with twin sets, and so for instance, I've trained a few GUE divers in Sidemount. I've also trained some super experienced rebreather instructors, 100-meter rebreather instructors in Sidemount diving as preparation for cave diving. And they're awesome. I mean, they pick it up really, really fast because those foundational things I talked about before about weighting, buoyancy control, trim, balance, stability, they understand that, or at least they should understand that. And in the main, they do. And sometimes you've got to tidy a few things up, but in the main, they're pretty strong in that area. And what you're teaching them is the equipment. This is what Sidemount equipment looks like. This is how it's supposed to work. This is how it fits your body. This is how you don and doff. So it's the procedural stuff and then the skill set stuff that we're probably going to get onto in a second that you're teaching them. So they tend to be really much easier, much faster, as opposed to someone who's been single cylinder diving, for instance, for a long time. They'll be comfortable, but don't necessarily know this 2-cylinder stuff. And so, interesting.
Yeah, I try to take it in stages. So I get them donning and doffing and doing that to a really comfortable level before I even try and introduce fitting techniques, for example. So it's so during those initial dives, I wouldn't really talk about fitting techniques yet, but it's more about, let's do S drills, let's do out of air share drills and learning how to tuck in your hoses and all that. And until they can get those things to a comfortable level, then I start introducing, body positioning, trim awareness, like tank trim awareness. Those kind of things. So if you try and throw it all at once to these guys, some of them, they'll get disheartened and they'll probably want to quit.
And it's one of the things back to that is I focus on, I think I spoke to Natalie Gibb about this quite a bit as well, is that, the foundation is really the stability and trying to layer things on top of them before they're really stable. All it causes, what you see in the water, is that they end up thrashing around and kicking and hand sculling and all that, like they're trying to get the task done rather than trying to be stable and do the task. They don't have to be motionless in the water, but if they can't be relatively still in the water, I'd try not to progress on too much further because they're not going to be very successful, and it's much, much more value to them in teaching this stability, this, like, how do you be still? How do you maintain your trim? How do you get your, I mean, a lot of people, one of the biggest issues they have is the ankle position. They don't flex at the ankle, and therefore their fins are pointing up in the air. Therefore, when they move, they kick and they kind of needle up through the water feet first sometimes. So important stuff.
Yeah. So I'm still trying different elements, as you said, the sequence of, like what you just said was, totally makes sense. Yeah. Buoyancy, stability, and all that. However, I find that if you're already in side mount gear so I'd have to take them back into doing a back mount dive and making sure, they're stable in the water and got good buoyancy. Before I take them put them in side mount configuration and work in that. But yeah, I'm still kind of fine tuning the way I teach, and I think every single course I'm trying, even with my IDCs, every single IDC I'm trying something new.
One recommendation there. You mentioned Steve Martin's videos earlier, and as everyone I hope knows, is I did 2 episodes with Steve and with Vas Proud, Steve's dive partner, and they were excellent, and they talked a lot about both their side mount diver videos, but also they have an instructor series. And for anyone out there who's an instructor and a little bit like didn't feel like they got the best instructor course, etc., you can go back and refer to these materials, and it does run through an entire course, incredibly detailed. And so it's a great investment, both if you're a diver and also an instructor. Just another point too, I do have a discount code for those, so if anyone's listening and would like to get hold of those videos, reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to share the discount code if you haven't bought from Steve before. So just that note, that code's available, so DM me if you want that. But great way to get the sequencing of courses as well. While where I came from with Tom Steiner and with the guys in Mexico, Steve's teaching is very, very well aligned with what they do, so that's great. But by the same token, even though I had been taught and trained that way and became an instructor that way, I also have referenced Steve's materials, and they've been awesome support for me in becoming, and improving my side mount instruction in particular. So highly recommend those. So so let's go on. We talked a bit about the buoyancy control. Let's start to put it in the water now. So let's say we've got our student to a stage where their equipment's fitted correctly. They understand how to adjust that if they need to. They've got their entry and exit. We've now weighted them correctly. It's super important. Buoyancy control. They can manage themselves in terms of where they are in the water column. They're in trim. They're balanced. We've worked on frog kick and helicopter turn back kick. Now we're starting to look at the side mount skill development in the water. So talk a little bit about what you do in terms of taking them from that foundational point through to the conclusion of the course in terms of the skill sets.
So once they've got, the foundations down, so there's a lot of, I do a lot of out of air sharing drills, right? So to me, it's not so much about providing the out of air, but it's about how they stow the hoses back afterwards and about the situational awareness when they do it, right? So
spot on.
So to a level, so it needs to be to a level where they can throw the hoses away and just be looking around, right, rather than be looking down and focusing on what they're doing. But maintaining balance, stability, and just situational awareness while doing it. So I do a lot of it.
Yeah, just on that one, it is a bit shocking how hard the hose stow is. And to be honest, it's probably the hardest skill in the course is not putting away the first loop, which is what you do after a gas shear, but putting away the second loop as well before you get out of the water. And you're spot on. I mean, it's something that you need to put a lot of time into. Because back to what I said earlier, people become very task focused and they think the most important thing is to get the hose away, whereas really the most important thing is to stay balanced and stable and with good awareness, and then complete the task while you're in that state. And I always sort of point out, hey, if you start to lose your stability, stop, or your awareness, stop. Have a look around, get yourself stable again, and then carry on with the skill. It's not like a race where, there's a clock and you have to have your hose away in this amount of time. That's not the way it works. It's more about getting the skill done while you remain stable and aware of what's going on. So I really like that. Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. There are places where the light fades and only the bold keep going, where silence surrounds every breath and every moment matters. This is the world of underwater exploration, the last frontier. It's the world XDEEP was made for. From the ice-covered caves of Scandinavia through to the deep passages of Mexican cenotes to submerged tunnels beneath mountain fortresses, XDEEP gear is trusted wherever precision, durability, and focus decide the outcome. The XDEEP Exploration Support Program exists to back those who go beyond, those who explore to understand, who dive not just for depth, but to document, protect, and inspire. With advanced equipment and meaningful support, XDEEP empowers explorers, scientists, and committed divers who push the boundaries beneath the surface. Exploration begins with a question. Progress begins with action. Lead your path with XDEEP. Discover more at exploration.xdeep.eu. Huge thanks to XDEEP for their support of the show. Let's get back to this episode.
I decided in my courses that's the one skill I don't compromise on, because it was the one skill I had the most biggest problem with when I was so it was so it was just a deliberate practice and just drills after drills and doing it and doing it to a comfortable level and I found that after I was able to do that, a lot of other things became easier, like just situational awareness wise and host routing. Awareness.
Yeah. Do you use aluminium cylinders on your courses?
Yeah, we're all alus here.
Yeah. Because one thing with that skill is it's so much easier with alloy cylinders than it is with steels, and that's something else to realize when you're completing that skill with steels, and you have to start sort of detaching the loop and perhaps the dry suit hose if you're using a dry suit. The weight of that cylinder at the valve is quite significant compared to an aluminium cylinder, and
for sure.
So it's just so much more important. So that's something that I point out, as well as all the differences between cylinder types. Okay. Carry on. So you're talking about sort of a big focus on the outer gas skill, not just from the point of view of the outer gas requirement itself, but also hose stowing and managing that. Talk us through a bit more about what you do.
Also, so one of the biggest things is people that aren't trained well enough on side mount. They always get complaints from other divers in dive center, especially boat drivers and all that these side mount guys are a pain in the ass, and all that. And that's the other thing I'm like, look, when you're on a boat, you want to make sure that you're the first in the water and you don't rely on anyone. So I teach, so one of the entries into the water, I teach self-reliance on how to get it. So it's not just about kitting up and backrolling in the water. So the kind of environment that we dive in, sometimes, the boats, so we're on little speedboats that take up to 10, 15 divers at a time. We moor off at a mooring line. So if you're moored off, so I teach if you're moored off on a mooring line, so how to be able to, you just basically have a rope that you tie off on the side of the boat with knots and that you can then just clip your tanks onto and just,
love it,
kind of place them in the water. So you have your short hose just at the surface, and then you have your long hose tank below that, so you can clip on your short hose. Just you're already in your kit. As soon as you get to the dive site, clip these tanks on the rope, place them in the water. You're in the water, kitting up before everyone else is like putting the tanks on, and then as you're coming up, clip them off to the rope, and then jump on the boat. Carry
just
the
pull it up,
boat. and you're self-reliant. You just pull them up. And
mate, I absolutely love that. And you don't see it enough. Sometimes, obviously, if you're on a charter boat, you have to ask for the rope and a weight on the end of it. The other thing you can do on that, I can't remember who I got this from, probably Steve Martin, was to put a prusik loop on there. You can tie knots in, but if it's not your line, just a loop of paracord that you then wrap around twice and loop through itself twice becomes a prusik loop, which is a climbing knot, if you like.
I love the double prusik, so
you can use that to clip off. And they're great. Like I carry 3 or 4 of those in my pockets, and then if I need them, I just pull them out, put them on the line. They're big enough to go on various line sizes, and then that's an awesome way to clip. And also later on, as you're getting into stage or deco diving, where you're carrying 3 or 4 cylinders, and cylinder management becomes much more difficult again. And so being able to do, as you've suggested, clipping them off on a line, both for your entry and for your exit, is absolutely excellent. The only thing you have to make sure then is that obviously if you're putting things on in the water, that you're doing your checks before you start to get on your dive. So you have to make sure that you're doing a 6 meter check, and that, but regulators breathe. You've tested all you get, and that's something a little bit deeper than perhaps we want to go into. But you just need to make sure that you've done that, and that you're doing that in the appropriate way. So awesome. Okay, so that entries, exits. The other things that I kind of look at a lot is, especially early on in the course, I'll just let them do a lot of swimming around and give them tons of practice at gas management, the regulator switching.
Yeah.
So that they, lots of times I'll be coming up asking, what's your gas pressure? So that they have to look, and have that moment of stopping in the water, looking at their SPGs, or if they're using transmitters at their computer, signaling what their gas pressure is, and then maintaining it within whatever level we've said. Normally I try and get them to work to within 20 bar of each other, ideally 10 bar, but they can have a 20 bar crossover. So that's a really good discipline. I mean, I know for me now it's so subconscious where I don't have to think about it anymore. I just basically switch. And I'm almost always within 10 bar of each other. So it's an important skill of side mount diving, and something that's a little different from back mount twin set in particular, and of course single cylinder diving, that they need to bed in is one of the, as I said, subconscious skills. The other thing is cylinder trim. You mentioned that earlier. It is a bit of a especially with aluminium cylinders. I know Andy Davis is very critical of sliding D-rings, which I love, and I'll explain why in a moment. And this idea that you need to be able to trim your cylinder with aluminiums is vital, and it's a little bit important with steels as well. So talk us through a little bit about, you mentioned you struggled with that for a while because you didn't understand it, but obviously you do now. So on the courses, how do you manage cylinder trim for your students and teach that?
So I went from teaching using sliding D-rings to fixed D-rings, and now I'm probably gonna do the switch back to sliding D-rings again.
Yeah.
I think I find that when you teach fixed D-rings, cylinder trim awareness it's a little bit harder to teach than with sliding D-rings.
Yes.
I think when you have sliding D-rings, the students become more aware of cylinder trim. And it's just easier to get them to adjust it underwater as well. I think when you have fixed D-rings, where you're just having to switch the D-rings once throughout the dive, it just throws off awareness. I think it doesn't throw it out out of the window, but it's just less of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's make a couple of points here. So firstly, aluminium cylinders, it's a bit of a push in terms of, and by that I mean I don't think it matters that much whether you use fixed or sliding. The reason for that is that you set one of the rearmost D-ring at a point where your cylinders are going to be trimmed at the beginning of the dive when they're full of gas, and then pretty quickly, actually, I mean probably by the time you get down to 150, 130 bar, you're going to be thinking about moving them. They're going to be starting to float up. And then you move them once to a forward position. And the nature of the aluminium cylinders is such that, when they then rotate into your body, they lock into the right place, and they can't go any further because they've already put forward. They're already buoyant, so they're not going to fall down. And so in that case, they just lock into the side of your body and everything's fantastic. And so you don't have to worry about it once on your dive. And that's the real strength of fixed D-rings for aluminium cylinders. I contrast that with steels, where that is not the case. And if you had 2 points with steel cylinders, what's going to happen at the beginning of the dive, they're going to be in a good position. You might even have them clip right back. And then when they start to become buoyant, if you then move them into the forward position, they're going to hang really low because they're still going to be negative. And even though they've become starting to float up a little bit, they're still negative. And so what's happening is you're basically in this kind of area where you're going to have bad cylinder trim. And so sliding D-rings for steel cylinders, I think, are essential from that point of view, because you can be, it's really easy to adjust them. And you can just, I do it every time I do a regulator switch. I just have a quick check back, just push the cylinders into the sides of my body and feel them on my hips, or I run the tops of my hands across the top of them. And if I'm above, then I know they're too high. If I'm hitting my hips, then I know they're too low. And so it's a really important skill to develop there. I mentioned Andy Davis, who I've got a lot of respect for, but I disagree with him vehemently on this point, because I think, being in the Philippines, he's diving aluminium cylinders a lot. His point was that the sliding D-ring is an equipment solution to a skill problem, which I'm going to call bullshit. And basically because there's a skill of unclipping the bottom and clipping it onto the front, which I don't think is much of a skill. You clip them on when you get in and out of the water. So it's not much of a skill to unclip and clip them forward. Equally, it's a bit of a skill to be able to adjust sliding D-rings. They're both skills, so they both have a place. And so I think based on your cylinder type, you make a decision what you want to use. Do you want to use fixed aluminium? Fantastic. I just wouldn't recommend it for steels.
But also not all aluminium cylinders behave the same way, right? So
I was about to say that,
they don't. So like sometimes, you have fixed D-rings, and then at some point they become buoyant, and then you switch them to the other D-ring, and then it's still it's buoyant, but it's not buoyant enough that it
will hold in, right?
So there's still that gray area where sometimes, and it depends on your cylinder as well. Something that they don't all behave the same way, and then But I find also the other thing about fixed D-rings is that when you change from saltwater to freshwater environment, your back D-ring, so for me, it's just much easier to use sliding because of that, because I do a lot of switch between saltwater and freshwater environment.
Yeah, me too. And that's absolutely spot on. Yeah, everything's so different in salt versus fresh. Salt, you're incredibly buoyant in relation to that, especially with aluminium. So, and we can talk about that some more. I did a whole video on cylinder selection if anyone wants to see that on the Sidemount Pro's YouTube channel. So fantastic. Well, a great discussion. Sorry to go off on that one, but it was it is important, because I think, as you rightly say, if you're changing cylinder types or changing environments, being fresh to salt to fresh, you're going to have to make adjustments to your gear for that.
Yeah.
The same if you change from wetsuit to dry suit, if you change from thin undergarments to thick undergarments, all of these things you need to be able to manage the changes to the way your equipment's going to behave in the water and be able to deal with that. Terrific. That cylinder trim. The other thing I teach quite a bit of, and it's mainly because we do a lot of wreck diving here, is I teach swimming in what I call different orientations. So being able to swim on your side in Sidemount. And back to the Steve Bogart's video, that you and I both kicked us off in Sidemount diving, seeing Steve swim on his side, on his back. I mean, I don't know, or an inverted. I don't know if there's much call for that normally, but definitely to go through doors on an upright shipwreck, you typically
I've had to swim inverted. Yeah, for sure. I've had to swim inverted.
When did you have, what was that?
One of the wrecks here. It wasn't that I had to, but I just, it was.
You just did.
It was. I just wanted to see what the view was like, going upside down. Because that was So so it does come in handy, and sometimes. So I sometimes also teach in a pool, right? So when I'm in a swimming pool and teaching Sidemount, so I'll rewind a little bit. So I did a few years ago, even though I was already quite a experienced Sidemount diver, I chose to do the basic razor course, only because I just wanted to see, the skills they were teaching on the course, and I really wanted to. It was more of a academic sort of pursuit, and I did the course with a friend of mine in Malaysia, and so one of the skills they did was to swim on the side of the pool sideways, and so I've kind of incorporated that into my teaching as well now.
Well, I use usually a shipwreck for it. Like we'll swim along the side of a shipwreck, along a bulkhead or a wall of the wreck on the exterior on the upper deck, and that is pretty interesting for them. We swim all the way down one side, go around the end. That's about 50 meters of swimming, and then come back on the other side. And so, and I think one of the things I would emphasize that's a bit surprising to people is that if you've got your equipment set correctly, and so that your cylinders aren't falling away from your body and all that sort of thing, then it's incredibly easy to swim on your side, and all you really have to do is turn and then relax and then just accomplish your frog kick exactly as you would normally, keep your posture the same. The same when you invert. You know, the thing most people get wrong when they invert is they don't lift their head. You know, they don't have their head extended backwards, looking forward. You know, so if you don't do that, you're not in the correct posture again, and you're gonna turn. But if you extend your head so that you're looking forward while you're inverted, it's actually relatively easy to hold an inverted position. And and like you, I do it from time to time. I remember, like on descent, sometimes I'll be turning to look, if I get ahead of someone or I want to see where someone is, I'll turn upside down to see where they are. So that's very cool. Very cool to be able to do that.
Yeah. So one of the things we did say we were going to talk about was how I tie in like Sidemount diving elements, tech diving elements into how I train dive instructors. So
yes,
I adopt a lot of the philosophy of of tech training and Sidemount training into teaching my IEC, specifically when it comes to like things like deliberate practice, repetition, building repetition of the skill. It's not just learn. You don't just do it once and then that's it, and then you like just yesterday I came across so in my IDC is an example of this. Like one of the skills we teach is knot tying, right? Basic knot tying for the search and recovery dive, where you're rigging these knots onto a lift bag, but then so these guys are like they're tying the knots, they're getting it, and then you get them to do it underwater, and it's a whole different perspective, and so I'm like, look, you guys got to go back and tie these knots, close your eyes, tie them behind your back. Just do them until you're not even thinking about it. That's how you basically, that's so if you go into the water, it doesn't matter, if the lines float, the rope's floating up a little bit and all that, you already, you already have different perspectives of how you tie it.
I remember when I joined the Navy, one of the things they did is they issued us with a length of cordage. It was sisal rope, and we in class had to tie an eye splice into one end and an end splice into the other end of it. So it became this kind of loop. But then we would also tie knots in it and use it for knot tying. And so by actually carrying it around, we had to carry it around with us. So then it sat cheesed up on top of our counter next to our bed as well. So then this idea of having a piece of cordage with you all of the time, so that whenever you had a spare moment, you could practice a couple of knots is really important, or a good way to learn knot tying skills.
Yeah. And also, things like positional control and in the water when you're teaching, like even as something as basic as an open water course, like you as the instructor, you need to have more gears than just the first gear and a second gear, forward gear. You need to have, a reverse gear. You need to, sideways gear. Maybe, maybe not as proficient as Michur or Andy Davis as they, doing side kicks on the wreck, and so that's even I can't do it as well as they can. So I'm still working on that skill. But anyway, it's just having about positional control when you're teaching skills on the surface, for example. You want to be swimming into your students. You want to be able to maintain positional control. So a lot of them come into instructor training lacking these basic skills, right?
You sort of understand how that happens too, because the only place that you really learn those skills typically is on tech diving courses. So if you've got someone who's becoming an instructor who's already done a tech course or 2 or 3 or 4, then they're in a much better position than someone who hasn't. Because these concepts, which are, apart from peak performance buoyancy, for heaven's sake, where else do you learn those sort of skills? You just don't.
Like you can log as many dives as you want, like 300, 400 dives, but it doesn't guarantee that you have a skill. You don't. It doesn't guarantee that you have stability skills.
I never take any notice of dive numbers. It's more the quality of the dives that you've done. And as I said, I'm a big fan of tech. I honestly, I don't know if you'd want to make this a rule, but because it depends what you want to teach too. But I just honestly think that tech diving courses, even if you did a Sidemount course or you did intro to tech, for heaven's sake, if you wanted to be back mount, that's a big head start to you as an instructor, going through the learning of these sort of principles before you become a recreational instructor. One thing I'm seeing a lot of, I don't know whether you guys do this, is teaching open water courses, neutrally buoyant. I know the raid guys do this. I know the guys that I work with at Global Dive do this. Is, the days of kneeling on the bottom in a circle and doing skills, it never made any sense to me. And because basically when you need to employ that skill, do you want someone kneeling on the bottom when they do it? You don't. Yeah. And so you want them, you teach them, don't touch the reef, and then you teach them all their skills kneeling in the sand, So, I think that's a really big thing and I'm pleased to see that come into a lot of open water courses now.
So one of the things one of the new things I incorporated in this current IDC I'm teaching is I have a real student that did his open water and advanced course within my IDC. So I was role modeling, how do you basically take a student from, nothing to getting neutrally buoyant, planning his dives properly, gas management skills, that kind of stuff, and awareness. And it all starts from you've got the skill of the first skill where neutral buoyancy is introduced so I actually personally don't think, you need to get them neutrally buoyant as soon as they get in the water, because they need to have that comfort level because they've got it's a whole new ball game for these guys, right? So you need to learn how to breathe properly first, right? So, but however, when the first neutral buoyancy skill is taught, after that, everything should be done neutrally buoyant. Absolutely.
Gotcha.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever that they're doing we do it as a fin pivot,
fin pivot,
That's usually how. And then after that, you tell them, okay, now release your air, kneel back down. It absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. So it's just pointing it out and sometimes it's mind blowing to a lot of these dive masters who come into my IDCs. It's mind blowing to them because the courses they've assisted before this, they're like, oh, we've never seen this before. Like, what if you have, someone who can't do it? I'm like, well, you're making it worse by not getting them to practice neutral buoyancy. You like mollycoddling them rather than taking them to the next level, right?
And it does come back to this point of money and time and getting people through courses. And so, you imagine, it is. I mean, I think that is the issue more than anything else, because there's no can't. Of course they can do it. Like we're not so special because you and I can do it, that someone else can't, for heaven's sake. So I absolutely think it's just a matter of time. And rewinding a little bit, I do agree with you. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing in a pool, going through and doing a series of on your knees. You're learning the basic skills, you're learning to breathe, you're learning your first mask clears, all of the things that you need to cover early. And then, as you say, once you've done the fin pivot and learned neutral buoyancy, now we're going to repeat those skills, but we're going to do them neutral. And of course, they might fail a few times until they get it. No one is expected to get it right the first time necessarily, but they know where they're going now, and they know that they need to practice to get it done neutrally buoyant. So I do agree with what you said there. Maybe I was being a bit over dramatic in terms of when it needs to come in, but the point is it needs to come in, right? You should not finish a course without doing that.
It can't be treated as a skill. It needs to from then that's the way you're gonna dive from now on. It's not just like okay, let's do a fin pivot, you're done, let's go kneel back down. No, it's how you dive.
Love it,
right? Yeah.
I was just going to say, and then of course, when these people turn up on our Sidemount courses, they're in so much better shape, right? Because without doing a tech course, they've already learnt neutral buoyancy, which is fantastic.
Yeah. So which comes to the subject of wading now. So wading of awareness is severely lacking in a lot of dive masters that come into the IDCs.
Yes.
Only because they're not taught any wading awareness during the dive master course. They're taught to be overweighted to perform these skills. Yeah, it's better to overweight yourself because it's easier for you to perform them, right? And then they come into the I mean, I'm sure about there's a lot of PADI bashing that goes around. Oh yeah, PADI, blah blah blah. It's not. Yeah, in a way, it's not. I'm telling you, it's not the syllabus, it's not the course syllabus, it's not the agency, right? It's the awareness of these instructors that are churned out, and And
Yep.
especially when you go through a bubble where, it's like you're churning out dive instructors who go on to teach open water divers who progress some places, these guys start their diving career in the same place and they become course directors in the same place, and they don't ever
Yes.
come out of this bubble. It's the very similar style of teaching.
Yes.
In every single IDC that I've worked on before I became a course director, nobody ever taught buoyancy checks, right? Not a
Yes.
single one, and it's not a skill that comes out in the exam either. And I've been speaking to the instructor development team at PADI saying, like, you need to introduce the skill because it's not a skill in the IE. Course directors aren't making it a skill for the instructor candidates to teach. Therefore, they don't have any kind of understanding of proper weighting.
Yep. Yeah.
And so they don't go, when they go on to teach open water courses, they don't emphasize the skill. In actual fact, in confined water alone, neutral buoyancy weight checks come out. It appears 4 times in confined water alone, and you're lucky if you get an instructor that teaches it once.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting area because, I mean, when you were first taught, you kind of taught this jump in the water with your cylinder and take a half breath or whatever, and you should float at eye level and breathe out, you should sink and da-da-da-da-da. And that's all super interesting. To be honest, as of right now, I don't even know how well that works or not because I don't do it that way. And I don't know how you do. I mean, I don't know, again, if you can remember from Steve Martin's videos how he and Vas did it, because that was the way that I was taught as well, which is at the end of the dive, drain your cylinder to 30 bar, stay at 3 meters in trim. If you're in a dry suit, a little bit of gas in your dry suit to keep the squeeze off, and then no gas in your BCD whatsoever. And you should be able to breathe into 80% lung volume, ascend, breathe out to 50%, stop, breathe out to 20% lung volume, sink.
The numbers with 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, you remember it. You remember it. Yeah. And what an accurate and amazing way to do it, because if you do that at the beginning of the dive, you're going to be too light at the end of the dive when you've consumed 2 kilos of gas weight, right? And so the idea, by doing it this way, you do find at the beginning of the dive, you are a little bit heavy because you've got the 2 kilos of gas weight. So you shouldn't have any trouble descending. And so if you're teaching descents properly, making sure their BCD is empty and make sure they needle down in the water and that they're not trying to push water down, that they breathe out fully, they should descend super easy. But then the beauty is when you get a low cylinder volume at the end of the dive and you've got to hold your safety stop, you're not too buoyant and end up blasting up to the surface. So, I don't know if that's how you teach it, or, I mean, certainly it's the way I do.
If I'm teaching Sidemount courses, I do it the way Steve Martin does it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm teaching open water courses, or when I'm teaching my instructors to teach these skills, so if you go through the PADI syllabus or whatever, they talk about normal breath, you fully deflated BCD, you should float at eye level, right? So a lot of these dive masters are taught that, hey, even if you're overweighted, you need to cheat to not, to make it look like you're fully deflating. But then the idea is you need to be floating at eye level, which makes no sense whatsoever. Right? You're not teaching them anything by doing that. Like you're taking away their understanding of how proper weighting works, right? So when I teach open water courses, I do it. So we combine confined water sessions. So we combine what we call confined water 2 and 3. Are you a PADI instructor, by the way? Or have you ever been one?
I was a PADI dive master. I'm a SDI TDI instructor.
So anyway, so we've got 5 confined waters in the open water course, and we generally combine some confined waters together. But then, during these sessions, I do a weight check at the start when the tank is heavy. But in doing so, I'd also use it as a teaching moment to tell the student, look, okay, you do the same procedure, hold a normal breath, deflate your BCD completely, but then you should expect to sink slightly, right? Not be at eye level. You should expect to sink slightly because you now have air in your tank, and air, I have to break it down very simply for them. Your air weighs about 2 kilos heavier than when it's empty. And then we'll do another check at the end of the session when
Yep.
if the tanks that, because it's a confined water session, they don't use that much air. I would just purposely tell them, okay, let's drain our cylinders down to 50 bar,
Yep.
40 bar, whatever. And
Yep.
then we'll do another check then. So now it's a more accurate time to check for proper weighting. So we'll do the same thing, but this time you should expect to float at eye level, but also make sure you exhale fully to see that you're able to sink. Especially
Yes.
with the amount of exposure suit that you're wearing or whatever. It also depends on what exposure material you're wearing. Yeah. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
100%.
making them aware about it, and I find that so the knowledge, this particular knowledge is brand new to a lot of instructor candidates. They're like, oh my god, like I thought you can only do. And I always get the question like, but you can only do a weight check at the end of the dive. I'm like, no, you can do it at the start of the dive just to account for that extra weight in your cylinder. Like it's
spot on. Yep. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and then understanding, how much do you need to add weight, do you need to remove weight, and also understanding the why behind this. It's one thing that Ed Sorensen taught me that stays with me is always the why behind the how. And so why do we do this? And I mean, I know you're a rebreather diver as well, and as soon as you get onto rebreathers, you get the why pretty quick, which is these gas spaces at shallow depths. If you're moving just a few centimeters up or down, the gas space, the expansion and contraction of the gas space is so dramatic that it affects your buoyancy. And so even as a new diver, having one or two gas spaces, if you're wearing a dry suit, it's important to make sure that you have the minimum possible gas in there, so that you don't have this dramatic effect from gas expansion and contraction with depth. So, yeah, interesting, mate. Hey, let's just quickly talk. We've talked a bit about this instructor facet, and we're on IDCs, but I'll just bring it back to Sidemount a bit at the moment, and talk about the path to Sidemount instructor. I've talked about this a few times on the course, but I'm interested in your thoughts. I'm not a big fan of Sidemount being a specialty. I do think it should be an explicit course like CCR course or Intro to Tech. Yeah. But let's just talk it through. I mean, when you see someone who wants to be a Sidemount instructor candidate, how do you advise them, and then how do you take them through their training?
Well, it got much worse last year or 2 years ago, when PADI made it that you could become a Sidemount diver and log 50 dives and self-certify as a Sidemount instructor. I'm like, oh my, like this is nonsense. Like, it's crazy. But anyway, with that knowledge, so basically, if anyone came to me and said they wanted to be a Sidemount instructor, I'd be like, okay, how often do you dive Sidemount? Like, is it something you do, as a sideline? Is it something you do only when you go fun diving, or is it something you actually incorporate in your teaching? So in my dive center, so I've got a couple of guys who are Sidemount divers, and I gave them before, so 2 months ago, before I left to Thailand for a month, I'm like, look, when I get back, guys, if you want to continue your journey to becoming Sidemount instructors, I want you to be logging Sidemount dives and teaching on Sidemount. You need to be comfortable teaching normal courses, like open water courses, maybe not in confined water, but during the open water dives, switch to Sidemount. When you're doing advanced courses, teach it in Sidemount. Make it as part of your normal dive configuration. Only switch to back mount if you have to, like if you're doing confined water training or whatever, and you have to be in back mount, then yeah, sure, but dive in Sidemount. That's the only way you build the muscle memory, the skill. And yeah, obviously I list down the things that they need to work on, like knowledge on harness configuration, like equipment configuration, all these things. And for me, it's it can't be fast track, and you need to be diving a lot on Sidemount for sure.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, if it's just a play configuration for you, why do you want to be an instructor in it? You've got to have some passion for the configuration. And I mean, for me, quite often, good Sidemount instructors are already cave divers as well. Perhaps they've done cave training, they've already Sidemount dived, or at least maybe if they don't have access to caves, they're wreck diving in Sidemount. I just think it makes a massive difference And I had a note here about fast tracking as well. As I said, you hit the nail on the head. Got to be a configuration that's important to you. If you don't dive it all the time, you dive it a lot, and then you've used it in some different environments. And I think the other thing that's become very key for me recently is just this ability you mentioned about diving in different places, being able to go from saltwater to freshwater, steel cylinders, aluminium, dry suit, wetsuit, and knowing how to accommodate those changes. Because I think that's where a lot of sidemount divers struggle, is understanding the impact of these changes and how you should adjust your equipment accordingly as you move. In my mind, a good sidemount diver can pick up any reasonable cylinder. I mean, down to 7-liter steels, 40 cubic feet aluminiums, up to 80 LE80s, 12-liter steels. I dive some 300 bar 7s as well, which is a bit tricky, but just being able to do that is a really important skill set. And I think, and then dry suit, wetsuit as well, saltwater, freshwater, just understanding how that works, I think is important. Brilliant. Yeah. Well, mate, we've done really well. And I guess in closing, let's talk a little bit about your dive center and if someone wants to come and learn sidemount from you or one of your team there. You mentioned where you're based. You're flying to Kuala Lumpur, I assume, to get to you?
Yeah, so Kuala Lumpur is the main city. It's the capital. Mm-hmm. But then there's an airport at Kota Bharu itself, so you could fly from Kuala Lumpur to Kota Bharu, and then from Kota Bharu it's an hour by car to the jetty, and then you take a boat across. That's half an hour.
Oh, brilliant! So a little bit of a journey, but not too bad. And what's your dive center called again?
Anti-gravity divers.
Anti-gravity, gotcha.
Yeah.
Love it, brilliant. And you teach sidemount. You obviously teach all of the basic recreational courses and specialties. Anything else?
So right now I've just become an instructor. Have you heard of the Avelo system?
I have. I don't know very much about it, but I've heard of it.
It's super interesting. Like really, really interesting. Anyway, basically it's a diving system that doesn't require a BCD or a bladder. And everything it works on a ballast system in the tank. You pump in water in the tank, and that's your buoyancy. And once you're set to neutral buoyancy, that doesn't change. So one of the coolest things about Avelo is one of the skills we do is we go from 15 meters, and we basically swim up at a normal ascent rate all the way up to 5 meters, and it's just to demonstrate that nothing changes in your buoyancy. You're still neutral. I mean, you're just controlling everything with your lungs and nothing with your BCD or bladder because you don't have one.
Yes.
I'm also talking to the founder, and so I already spoke to him about developing it for sidemount diving, and he's like, you go ahead and do it. Like he basically said, okay, this is what you need to do, blah blah blah. It's not worth my time and money to do it commercially, but if you are interested in this and you want to do it, like go ahead and develop it on your own. It's got very interesting applications. Like the guys he's got some really cool ideas, but I believe it's gonna create, it's an easier way of diving, safer way of diving, I think more fun way of diving as well. I mean, it's not for everyone, like being a cave diver, tech diver myself, like if you ask me to think about it as so I love driving manual shift cars, like but I also see an application for driving automatics. So the Avelo is exactly that. It's like an automatic car, and there's an application for it for sure.
Brilliant. It sounds like almost the subject of a whole nother episode, so perhaps we can go revisit that sometime and talk about Avelo. Sure. Maybe, I mean, obviously because it's Speaking Sidemount, maybe as you develop, if you get around to doing the Sidemount version, we can get you on to talk to us about that and tell us how it works and how that might improve our diving. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Anand, it's been fantastic talking to you. I'll grab some links for you and I'll make sure I list them in the podcast notes for this. If anyone wants to look up Anand and anti-gravity divers in Malaysia, then a wonderful part of the world, by the way. I've been, when I was in the Navy, to Lamut and also to Pulau Tioman.
Yeah, I remember there used to be a RAF air base in Lamut. because I went to school with a couple of Aussie kids that his dads were working in the Navy.
Yeah, yeah,
Were in the
yeah.
Navy, yeah.
Yeah. Lamort was a place that we'd go for maintenance period, so that they had a really good maintenance facilities there. And then Palau Tioman was, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, was we'd stop the ship off the coast and just take a boat ashore and have a barbecue on the beach there. And it was just this fabulous tropical location, and we'd have a couple of beers and a barbecue and a bit of a run around the beach. And after we'd been at sea for a while, it was a fantastic distraction from work, that's for sure. So very, very fond memories. Haven't visited much beyond that, so it'd be awesome to do that sometime. But mate, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge, and also discussing with me about what it takes to be good in Sidemount. I think it's a really important part of Speaking Sidemount is that we visit this every now and again. So thank you for providing that opportunity for all of us.
So thanks for having me on, Steve. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast and would like to support the show, then why not become a patron of Speaking Sidemount? For as little as $5 per month, you can become a part of the Speaking Sidemount team, get exclusive early access to all of the episodes, and help us to deliver the very best Sidemount, cave, and technical dive content available. Just go to www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount for all of the details. The address is also on our Facebook page, listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us for our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.